I'm really appreciative of this chance to share a bit about this study and the work we're doing, and even more excited to hear folks' reactions and thoughts in relation to it. But I'll try to give a quick overview of what Ben Bowyer, who's my co-author, and I did in this article, and what we think we learned, and of course, then open it up for dialogue. So back in early 2015, as we were working on a broader study of young people's engagement with digital media in relation to politics, we were increasingly aware of the challenge that not just young people, but all of us face, figuring out what's credible, what's accurate. We talked a lot about information and misinformation, and both of those were readily available on the internet. And as educators, what we were curious about is whether or not the media literacy efforts that teachers might engage in had any impact on young people's ability to identify what's accurate and what's not, or their desire to identify what's accurate or not. And so we created a little experiment that went on a survey. And the experiment took into account a couple factors. First, it tried to pick a topic that was getting a reasonable amount of political attention, and that was economic inequality. This was following up on the sort of Occupy movement stuff, and this was before the Sanders campaign made that such a central issue, but it was already an issue. And we also, so we were showing people content related to economic inequality, some of which was accurate and some of which was dramatically inaccurate. But we also varied what we showed people in terms of its sort of political leaning. So we showed people some stuff that had a very strong liberal stance to the argument that there's way too big income and wealth difference in the country. And we showed some people stuff that had a conservative slant, that taxes were way too high on the rich and they were already, or the well-off and what they might call the most productive members of the society were already paying far more than their fair share. And we were curious whether or not students would identify as accurate things that were accurate, and whether they would identify as inaccurate things that were inaccurate. And we knew from the research that it mattered a lot whether or not the thing they were being shown aligned with what they believed in terms of policy. In other words, there's lots of research that shows that liberals are far more likely to judge something as accurate if it aligns with their political perspective than they are if it doesn't, and vice versa for conservatives. So the nice thing about an online survey is you can randomly expose people to things. So you can show liberals liberal-leaning stuff and liberals conservative-leaning stuff. You can show them accurate stuff as well as inaccurate stuff, and you can randomize who gets what. So you can tell whether or not there are patterns in the ways in which content gets judged. The other thing that we asked about was whether or not young people had had media literacy learning opportunities that might impact the way in which they judge online content. So we asked whether or not their teachers talked about the importance of judging the factual accuracy of what they find online. And we asked about whether in their classes they had learned about ways to judge the accuracy of what people find online. And we did that because, again, at a very general level, there's research that shows or that indicates that people need both the will and the capacity in order to do that kind of judgment. That it's possible that many people could know what's accurate, but they lack the will, and they therefore decide, that's fine, it aligns with what I already believe, I'm good with it. Or there's sometimes when people are trying to tell what's accurate and they lack the capacity to do so. So both will and capacity matter. So that was the basis of the experiment, and we did it with a nationally representative group of young people from all over the country. And we did all of this, as I said, in 2015, and then it took a while to analyze the data and get ready to publish it. And lo and behold, it gets published maybe 2 weeks before the election in November of 2016. And, about 1 week after that, this note, we thought this was an issue before, and really people did talk about this issue before, but the centrality of the issue just exploded with the revelations around how much inaccurate information was circulating and the degree to which there was fake news and all of that discussion. And, so hopefully this piece coming out at a good time is helpful, but clearly the enormity of the problem and the significance of the problem was not something that we were anticipating as we were working on it, but it certainly ended up aligning with where a lot of public conversation was going. So we did come up with some interesting findings, and I think for educators, they're encouraging findings. What we found was that when teachers talk about these issues, about whether judging the accuracy of information is important, when they stress that, and when they give kids opportunities to develop skills to judge the accuracy of information, kids are much more likely to label something that is inaccurate as inaccurate, and to label something that's accurate as accurate. And I'll give you the one stat that I think is the most important one. So the big challenge for both liberals and conservatives is seeing something that's inaccurate that aligns with your beliefs. And what we find is in society is when people see something that aligns with their beliefs, they're much more likely to judge it as accurate. And that's certainly what we found in our study. We showed people 2 graphs that were clearly labeled as coming from reputable sources, and they were very similar graphs. One pushed a conservative idea and one pushed a liberal idea. And sure enough, liberals coded the one that aligned with their beliefs as far more accurate than the one that aligned with the conservative beliefs. Even more concerning, though, when liberals saw a statement that was phenomenally inaccurate, they still said it was accurate. So the statement in this case was 90% of the rich don't pay any taxes at all. Their tax rate should go up. In actuality, it's less than 1% of highest income earners pay 0 taxes. And similarly, conservatives fared no better on this thing. When they saw something that said the 1% pay 90% of all taxes, their taxes should go down, conservatives said it was accurate, even though, again, the numbers are nowhere close to that. So here's the good news. The good news is that when teachers talked about the importance of judging accuracy, and when teachers gave kids skills to assess accuracy, their judgments of these inaccurate posts improved dramatically. So when someone was exposed to a post that was wildly inaccurate, but aligned with their beliefs, if they had had teachers who did those good practices, the degree to which they judged that post as inaccurate increased by 26%. So they became far more likely to say something's inaccurate when it was, even though it aligned with their beliefs. And we see that as encouraging. There's a ton more to learn about how to do this kind of education well. Our study isn't designed to get into the more intricate and super important aspects of that. So I'm really excited that we have a bunch of other educators who can help us all think about that. But it does show that the work that teachers are doing in schools right now, when they emphasize this kind of media literacy, is making a meaningful difference. So I'll leave it at that and look forward to the conversation.
That was a great synopsis of the work, and I think it explains why we're also interested in being a part of this conversation, and delighted to have you here, Joe. So thank you for sharing that piece. So